We're Aaron and Dave Tashin, co-hosts of the Mindful Educators podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now.
Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others.
Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
I feel like they should get an A. I mean, the students feel that way, so why not?
Yeah, why not? I feel like they should too. Thank you, Loom. Anyway, so
Hashtag not a sponsor. I'm gonna be a little activisty here for a second.
Ooh, you take a hot take?
This is
a
not
hot
like
take?
me, but
Hey, welcome back to the High Tech Podcast, where you are joined by myself, Josh,
Swartz?
and Yep, and that's Will. That's our other host. I honestly was kind of pausing because I felt like I was going to come up with a cool intro, and then I didn't.
Sure.
So,
Sure.
On that note, welcome to the High Tech Podcast, where we don't plan, and we sometimes just bullcrap our way through what we're doing. It's super fun, but we have a lot of fun doing it, you know?
That's
time.
it. That's the only reason we do this thing.
Yeah, and we sometimes learn stuff. We talk about
sure,
cool stuff.
Sure.
Anyway, we're back. We to you listening, you're like, yeah, but you never really went anywhere. And we're like, yeah, we know, but again, it's been like several weeks since we recorded, at least for us. So it feels like we're back.
I had
Feels like we've been on
to
hiatus.
reset my office tonight. Like, I have not actually
Yeah.
really been up here, and I've only been up here for work and stuff. I haven't even been up here playing video games. That's how much I've been going around, moving, doing stuff. So it took a lot tonight to get us up and going.
Yeah, Will is a man of the earth. I don't know. There was some phrase I was aiming for there, and I couldn't find it.
What the listener does not know is I was just looking at him like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. I
What?
don't. If we ever start doing video, you'll start to see some great. You'll be like, first of all, that's what those two look like. Like, yeah. We do. And secondly, you'll be like, man, Will looks at Josh weird a lot. And be like, yeah, he does. Because I say weird stuff. Anyway, okay, welcome back, High Tech Podcast. Before we jump into our fun stuff, our little spiel that we always do. If you're listening to us and you're like, man, I would love to connect with these guys online. Well, too bad. No, I'm joking.
What'd you do? Delete the Twitter?
Yeah, side note, website and Twitter are gone. No, so we have a Twitter. We like to tweet sometimes, and I mean Will likes to tweet sometimes, and I like to like what he tweets. But come check us out at High Tech Podcast and subscribe. Check us out. Leave some comments. Have some fun with us. We have some good times on that Twitter, so check us out there. And then, sorry, you put in a note about what you want the animal to be. I was like, I just started reading our script.
Like, what is
anyway,
that?
I was like, what the frick is this? That's not okay. So, anyway, if you are like, man, I don't like social media, I'm more of an email guy myself. And I'm like, you know what? That's great. You can set up at inbox@hightechpod.us. You can check that out.
All you
Send us
folks
some
that are
info.
not sponsors, just reach
Yeah.
out. You
Just,
you
reach
could
out.
be a sponsor.
You could be a sponsor. It's true. And if you are a sponsor, could you tell us? Because I don't know.
Yeah, we missed the memo.
We missed the memo. So you can hit us up at both those places. Both those places are also where you can send the legendary animal picture that we ask for every episode. We've been doing it since the beginning of this season-ish. I don't know. Remember when we started?
Dude, I got nothing.
Honestly, I've lost track. Anyway, but Will has a request, so I kind of want to let Will put this in here. Will, what would you like from our listeners this time?
Well, folks, as it is July when you're hearing this for the first time, feeling a little Christmas in July spontaneity, some support, some love here. So I want to see some reindeer with headgear. That's right.
Ooh,
Reindeer
rhymes and everything.
with headgear.
Reindeer with headgear. Okay? So you can send that to our Twitter or our email.
Exactly.
Or if you have our phone numbers, I guess technically you could text it to us, but that would be kind of lame. So
If
you
you
can send it
text,
to
disclaimer, if you text it to me, I will put it on Twitter. So,
Yeah.
it's just easier
and
for
if
you
you
to put
text
on
it to
Twitter.
me, I'll give it to Will to put on Twitter.
Bingo.
So anyway, Hit us up there. Also, we have a website, hightechpod.us.
.us.
Every episode you listen to, that's not true. Every episode you listen to has a episode page with information about the app that we talk about in that episode on our website. So go check us out. Check out the episode pages and be like, man, I wish I could listen to these guys more. Well, you can on our website. So go hit us up there.
Boom.
Okay. So with that, let's stop selflessly advertising ourselves and I guess selfishly advertising ourselves
there you
and
go.
start talking about, man, I'm not on fire tonight. I gotta be honest. I feel
just you need a little more gas, a little more.
Yeah, I need a little bit more gas. But I know what will get gas on the fire, and that's continuing our conversation from last episode about LMS as surveillance. So if you've been listening to our podcast and you listened to the last episode before this one, which would be 61, we talked about LMS as surveillance. We started the conversation and we told you there will be a part 2. Well, guess what? Now is the part 2.
We're actually delivering on our promises. I don't know.
Ooh, a song.
That
was impressive.
I take it all
that
back.
Was
No.
Totally
No.
that was uncalled for. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
Perfect.
Anyway, so we're continuing that conversation. So we had some hot takes last episode, and we're going to continue them this time. Just like last episode, we gave a positive and a negative kind of in our minds. I don't know if we said we were doing that. I should have listened back, said we were doing that, but that's what we did last episode.
That's what we wanted to do. Right.
That's what we wanted to do, so that's what we're doing now.
Right.
We're doing some more positive.
It's our podcast, dang it. We'll do what we want.
Yeah, we'll do whatever we want with it. So let's start with the positive, I guess. You know?
That's fine.
Let's start off on a good note.
Yeah. We'll build
so
everybody
LMS
up.
Surveillance. And just kind of as a reminder, first of all, if you haven't listened to the episode before this one, just stop. Hit stop right now. Go to episode 61.
Pause. Hightechpod.us.
Yeah, hightechpod.us. And go back and check out episode 61 and listen to our explanation of what we consider LMS surveillance, because we're not going to re-explain it right now.
Boom.
So you can check it out there. But then as you listen to that and you get here, now that you're all caught up with us, good,
Wow,
awesome.
that was so fast.
Glad. That was so quick. You should be proud of yourself. Positive, okay? So, faculty, this is you and I talk about this, Will. Kind of the faculty can see patterns in courses, okay? So this idea of collecting data, being able to kind of aggregate it, there is this advantage that I feel like that happens. We kind of leaned into this in the first episode a little bit too, which is like they can start to pick up patterns about how students do in courses, right?
Right. Yeah, and like the comparison, the first thing that I think is helpful here is like, what do you mean patterns, and is this online only or what? Like, you know, if you think about the face-to-face classroom, you are already aware of and becoming prejudiced towards your students' patterns every class. I don't say prejudice is a mean thing, right? Like prejudging, prejudice, the idea of like as you observe, as they do things more frequently, less frequently, as they step out of that, you know, regular occurrences, right? You're aware of that already in the physical classroom. What we're pointing to here is that the LMS is tracking a lot of things, a lot of data, everything your students are doing. And so the opportunity there, and I think maybe the responsibility, is to use those patterns and use them effectively. This is part of like the learning science that Josh and I stand behind. If you see these patterns, students, you know, all of your students always fail your exam in week 3. Like, that's a pattern. Like, why did they always fail that exam? What's happening there? What can you do with that? How can you improve that? That's just one example, right? But like these patterns in the physical classroom is like, why does John always show up late? Well, if you talk to John, maybe you find out that he's coming from his job. Maybe he has a class that ends 5 minutes before on the other side of campus, right? Like, there's always an explanation for the patterns we see, but the LMS, I think, in many ways makes it more explicit. Like, it's numbers, right? It's numbers, and it's really easy to put those in a spreadsheet or anything and get a report on it. You don't necessarily track, like, you're aware that John keeps showing up late. You might write it on your attendance sheet. But at the end of the semester, it's not like you've got a spreadsheet where you run that back based on your attendance sheet to see if there's a relationship to John's lateness to other people's lateness and stuff like that, right? Like, that's not something most folks are doing in the face-to-face classroom.
Yeah. Well, and LMSs can pick up that data in different levels, right? I mean, you could talk about just at a course level where, let's say you're in week 3 of your class, you have, big exam or you have some big paper or whatever, type of assessment you're doing, LMS can give you pretty quickly like what's average grade after they finish, what kind of there's ways to look at the LMS to find like your comments that you left across all the students to kind of maybe see some common patterns pretty quickly.
Sure.
There's different components of that, and that's kind of like a very focused level. There's also a broader level where like you can start to get patterns over multiple semesters and sessions of courses,
right,
that would be much harder for you to keep track of as a person and not a computer. So like you can start to pick up
what?
How students are progressing over a whole program, or how where students seem to get hung up in a course all the time, or and you can also start to pick up patterns not just course focused but person focused. Like, and this is a little less helpful for the instructor level, but you can start to see that like program coordinators can kind of see even like this student seems to be really has been struggling over the last like semester across their courses, and they can start to focus in on that stuff. The point of being that an LMS is always tracking all this stuff, and while that can sound terrifying, it also means that you can also pull that data together and start to see patterns. Now, do you know what's causing the pattern yet? Maybe not. Probably not. But you can start to at least narrow down and start to target in. It can also challenge assumptions. Because I feel like a lot of times when we're in the midst of a course, we think we know what's going on. Like the amount of times I hear people, or even myself, in a conversation will say something already having decided what the problem was before I said the thing. And then to like look at data and be like, oh, no, nobody's struggling there at all. They're actually struggling here. Like a completely different thing than I assumed, just because I was misconstrued by two people that I talked to that were struggling with this, and I just assumed that must be what everybody's problem is.
Face to face with the two folks who were struggling, and they just brought this emotional plea about it so much, and then you're like, oh yeah, okay, I'll go change this assignment, I'm sorry. And then you go actually look at the numbers, it's like, you were the only two that struggled with this. Like that is not a convincing case to say I need to change the assignment. If 2 people out of 20, 30, or 50 students, right? 2 is not a big number unless it's 2 out of 5. I think that's one of those things that maybe there's an opportunity to create a more flexible assignment, even if it's just 2. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to try or think about, right? But if you're ready to like toss the assignment out because and oh my gosh, I mean, this is just dragging up memories, frankly, of faculty coming to me like just hands in the air, crazed out, like, oh, this is failing, this isn't working, this tool doesn't work, this assignment didn't work, blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay. And I was even having something like this recently in my job. Like, you're saying this, I hear you, but what's your data? What are your data points, right? And what could possibly be behind those data points? I recently had someone come to me and say that something wasn't working because someone reported to them that it dropped off their radar. That language of dropped off is really what this person was holding on to, suggesting that like the tool didn't work, the feature didn't work, right? That I have no proof. I have no way to track or prove or disprove truly that did happen or didn't happen. But one person brought this to them, and that it is filling in like a prejudice against the tool. Like this person already thinks that the tool doesn't work. So when one person says something, it's like, oh, clearly this isn't working. No, we still need to go through the right process, right? Like next time you hear this, send them my way. I'll document it. We'll determine if it is or isn't their situation. It really could have just been the person saying that language dropped off, trying to like excuse the fact that they didn't accept the calendar invitation, right? It could have just been like them trying to pass the blame, not that there was actually a technical issue with something. This is common, with students and their assignments and in their way they handle things in the LMS, right? Oh, I didn't do that. It's too hard. Or I had too much going on. Maybe they just didn't scroll through there and actually read the instructions and take the time to realize it wasn't too hard and actually do it,
Yeah.
Everybody's in a different spot every time they come to every assignment. Like, not everyone is in the perfect space, mind space, physical space, for learning or for your assignment when they come to it. So anything could be impacting their decision to do it or to not be able to do it well, for instance. Like, these are the things, though, we can start to track for as much as possible. And another layer of this as a good thing is if you have this base layer data Did they do it? Did they not do it? Did they do it, and get full marks? Did they not get full marks? Did you leave them feedback? Did you not leave them feedback, right? These are some binary questions, yes and no's. If you have that kind of data, it leaves time for you to do like surveys and focus groups of like, did you like this assignment? Did it go well? What was the experience working with your colleagues? Like, if you don't even have some of that base data, it can't be informed by the qualitative data about how well the process actually went. So it's really, I think, a great foundation. It's a good thing. I have seen faculty use it well. I know it's been a part of almost every modern person's, doctoral research. You need this kind of data if you're in the student learning space. So it's critical.
And for practical for instructors, like if you're sitting there like, okay, I get this. You can pull data, all this type of stuff. You can pull these types of things. I think the stuff I've found most helpful, that I think faculty have found most helpful, is like just some of the simple, like the reality of this is LMSs are tracking grades, they're tracking submissions, they're tracking all this stuff over time, and you can at a glance get a picture of, okay, how many people in my class have submitted things, how many are still late, how many. Another one that I really like is like most LMSs, there's some way somewhere to see, okay, how many replies have happened to this discussion? What's the average amount of replies somebody replied to a discussion or interacted with this activity? And you can start to pick up some of that information. You can start to see averages of how the class is doing grade-wise. I mean, like, this sounds pretty standard, but it's the fact of the matter is LMSs provide this data, and so many faculty don't really use it that much. They just kind of look at the final grade. It's like, yeah, but you could get data on how students not just overall are doing, but how overall they did on certain activities. And that can start to maybe give you some clues of where either you might have a problem or there's some struggle points or some of those dynamics. Another fun one is most video tools in your LMS also track how often students watch sections of your videos. So we have a tool that does that tracks like from point 1 to point B, how many students were watching at these time slots. Like that could be very helpful to give you an idea of like, you know what? I had this video on the history of tanks that was 8 hours long, and they all fell off at 15 minutes. And so maybe...
Why don't they love tanks as much as I do, Josh?
I don't know. Yeah,
isn't that it? Like, if only they cared about tanks as much as I did.
Yeah, clearly. Anyway, that data can kind of tell you where students are falling off and stuff, where they maybe like you're losing their attention. This is very helpful, especially it's why it's very popular in online. It's very helpful in an online environment where it's harder to get some of that information on how engaged are your students. So you can start to look at things like that to be like, I can start to look at how much are they watching the videos that I'm putting in? How much are they actually replying in the discussions that we have going on or interacting in whatever chat tool you've got in your course or whatever you're using, and you can start to pick up pretty easily on weeks. Like, okay, on average, how are students doing? How much, another piece of data that can be really helpful is from this period to this period through this activity, how much did students improve, right? Like you start to pick up some of that data. Like, it's not just about, are they doing poor right now or not, but actually see, are they improving over time, or are students just kind of statically staying the same throughout the course, or are they struggling more? Are they, like, all this type of stuff can be pulled out of an LMS through this type of, like, surveillance and tracking type of situation. And while it seems Big Brother-ish, it is in certain areas, as we'll talk about in a second, it allows people to also pick up information that initially is not easy to get a hold of, where you'd have to do a lot of work.
You would need a whole other person.
Yes, you need a whole data person to do it, as opposed to an LMS who can pick some of that stuff up. So I think that's really helpful. And I think as faculty members, we could benefit more from at least learning how to use some of the basics of it.
Oh yeah,
to get a
definitely.
feel on how our students are doing.
Yeah, in summary on the positives, right, we definitely want to emphasize that there's these patterns are there in the grades. That's clear. The patterns are there in the actual content and how much time the students aren't spending with it, or if they aren't doing it. And then the patterns are there in engagement, like the level or the depth at which students are engaging with something, right? So you can see if they went to the page or not, but did they actually spend time on it? You can put knowledge checks into the page, and so you can see if they do those knowledge checks, if they actually understand it. Like, these are the kinds of things that you want to use this data for. And then like some of this is to check for or watch for the possible pitfalls, for the possible negatives. But if it's going great, there's your portfolio data. This is the stuff you should be gathering to put in your portfolio to say, hey, I taught this course and it went well. Boom.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
There's your snapshot. It does the work for you in that regard. You just need to write the paragraph.
Yeah. Or set up a scenario to do that. I mean, like, I remember we were in a situation where we had a language course that people they were trying to make an argument of why it shouldn't be 6 weeks and it should be 16 or whatever, right? So so there was a whole plan in the beginning. Like, they were going to have surveys that they give out to students as well, but they were also going to track, like, how the grades were, how students did, how much they improved from point A to point B, like, and from class to class, there were a 1 and a 2, right? And so they tracked, like, how they progressed. Now, the data didn't go the way they wanted. In this case, the data kind of basically said both groups did the same. But
oops.
Oops. But there's a point, though. Like, there was an assumption that the faculty automatically had, which is that they're going to do better. Now,
right.
Were they tracking all the right things? I don't know. And again, it was a very small sample group. It was not a huge... They didn't do this over years. It was like a semester. It's like, okay, that's like one group of people.
Oh my
There's so many
gosh.
other factors that you have no idea what could be happening. But if they had done that over multiple semesters, you would have at least started to get real data on... Okay, how are people actually doing in this longer version of a course than this version of a course, right? Yeah. Or how are people actually doing in this new program we're trying to release? So like if you preemptively plan to use this, you can also, as a faculty member, start to, it's not just about building arguments, but actually find information on how people are doing. Start to get some concrete information instead of just kind of like going off your gut. I feel like they did great in this one because we're often really bad at figuring that stuff out.
I feel like they should get an A. I mean, the students feel that way, so why not?
Yeah, why not? I feel like they should too. Anyway, so I think that data can help you see, if I could sum it up, you can see patterns in courses, grades, and engagement.
Now,
right?
As we know, with great power comes great responsibility.
No, I'm just joking.
If you flip this on its head, there are features, and even going back to the video stuff that Josh was talking about, there's features now in these things that, like, I literally track cursor activity. Like, you can see what the students are hovering on or clicking on. You can become the true big brother, the eye in the sky, penalizing the students for not spending 36 minutes on your assignment. Like, I mean, you literally could do that. You could write an assignment and say, you need to spend at least 35 minutes on this assignment. And if they do less than that, you'll see it and you could mark them against it. Like, this is not micromanaging. We do not want to endorse micromanaging. We do not want to encourage no micromanaging. Like, trust the students. Give them the work to do. And in many ways, as much as possible, or in healthy ways, get out of their way. Let them do the work.
Oh, 100%. I mean, listen, there's a lot of positive things it can be used for, but I also know from talking to people who want to use it, like, some of the stuff that people want to track is just, to a certain point, in my opinion, it is not trusting people. Like, and don't get me wrong, maybe we shouldn't all the time. We're very untrustworthy species. And so but like, I've heard people mention stuff like they want to, from like faculty engagement to students, they want to track, like, did they click on these videos? Did they click into this resource? Who didn't click into it? Who didn't open it?
Who didn't take my end of semester survey?
Yeah. Who didn't take this survey? Who didn't do this? Like, and to a point where it's just like, it's policing people. Right. On how they interact with the stuff you give them. And like, and to a certain extent, yes, I want people watching trainings I give out. I want people doing stuff. I'm not going to police to see who actually clicked on it unless they email me and say, I don't know how to do this. And I ask, did you watch the video? And they say yes. And I click in and see they didn't.
Right.
then I'm maybe going to be a little annoyed.
So Dr. Such and Such.
If you're listening to this and I send you training videos, do know that the video training tool that I have tells me when you open the video I send you. So just a side note.
I'm not talking to Robin.
Curious.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Thank you, Loom. Anyway, so but
hashtag not a sponsor.
Track that type of stuff. I have seen people want to track, and I think there's positives to this, but there's also just like people want to track how long did it take a faculty member to respond to a message or to feedback.
I've created those reports. Yep.
And it's like, yes, okay, you want to get information on how your faculty are doing. You want to get that type of stuff. But there's also a fine line where it becomes like, okay, you're looking at messages.
Yep.
That people send each other. Like, I understand having to do that when there's a claim of abuse made or there's issues made, but you're looking at response times for your faculty.
Yeah. John, I'm seeing that you replied after 24 and a half hours here.
I'm seeing
that's not our SLA.
Slower than the rest of your faculty.
Right.
Like, and it's, and listen, there's positives and negatives to both of this. I think if you listen to both these episodes, I hope you come away with the fact that Will and Josh aren't sold or totally against it. Okay.
That's fair.
I think even for all your tin hat, anti.
I've been pretty good tonight. I just want to say.
You have been. Yeah, I know you have been, but you're the first one to admit it. You put in our first episode description.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And I've talked with you.
Yes, I did.
Okay. But like, for all of that, you also see a lot of the benefits of all of this stuff, like the way that data can inform the decisions we can make, and the patterns that we see. I think my whole point, though, is that it's a dangerous line to walk.
I'm gonna be a little activist-y here for a second.
Ooh, you take a hot take?
This is not like me, but I want to say on this point too, if you're someone who's in a space where this is being used maybe a little maliciously or it's got too much of the negative approach, speak up about it. Stand up to it. I've actually now, in the last year, been in two kind of situations where like somebody was asking for data that I didn't want to give of myself, and I just said no. And it's like, it's not easy when you're just like, I just need to give if I just give you this, I can move forward. Yeah, if I just give you this, I can get in the door, And it's like, no, you don't need that. You don't need that data. There's no reason for you to have that on some things, right? And so like if someone makes an issue about your watch time on an assignment and like you're doing well in the course, student, speak up for yourself. That's okay. Maybe you're a fast reader. Maybe you skim very well. Maybe you already knew something about the context and you're just faster than your peers, right? And you don't need as much of the narrative content. Like that's where again those patterns need to inform us but not drive our decision making in many ways, right?
There's recently I was having a conversation with somebody and there's kind of this distinction between like data informed and like data decision making, right? Like this idea of like the data informs maybe how you think about something, what you do, but you don't just like look at data and make decisions off of just what you see there.
Right.
Like, and I think that's the fine line you walk, right? Is like the people who are doing this well are the people who are going, the data is not the tell-all. The data is just like, it's something to inform me. It's maybe if you're somebody using this with faculty and monitoring, it's maybe something to see a pattern in faculty that you want to work through, or maybe like a specific person, you don't come down on them, but be like, hey, we're noticing this pattern, hey, like,
is there something that's going on?
Is there something
can we talk
going
about
on?
it?
How can we support you? How can we help you? Right. Instead of, I've seen people be like, yeah, we've seen you're slower, you're fired. Like that's, and it's like, you don't know the whole story. I'm cool with the activist side,
Yeah. Well, at the same side, like that was kind of a little bit of the students, but like on the faculty side, if your institution's asking you to measure data points or your program's asking you to measure data points that you're not comfortable with, like say so. Like it is, I don't know, it's not something that's like live or die, like I don't think you should lose your job over disagreeing about data, but I take data very seriously. I believe the data I create is my data. I think that there's a data ownership issue in the majority of the world's perception of data right now. But all of these companies, in terms of service and privacy policies, and even the things that we signed to go to our schools, say that like they have access to it. It's their prerogative to have access to our data.
Yeah.
Well, maybe even if that's the case, I'd love to see that change. But maybe we can be a part of at least using it differently where in those places that it is being taken. Like, we don't have to perpetuate this.
I would say fight for nuance. I think, like, if I had to define something, like, fight for nuance. Like, try to figure out... I think often what I like to ask people is when they're, like, throwing out data like they've just found the smoking gun, which just makes me laugh. Like, every time you're in, like, a conversation with somebody about data... It's like, there's always that one person that, like, makes it sound like they just found this magic wand that solves all the problems.
Have you ever seen a spreadsheet before?
Have you seen this? And it's like, it just, stop. But, like, having some kind of nuance to it, I think is where it really comes down to. I think where I'm always torn on this, and maybe that's where, this hot take's been helpful. It's given my definition of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for nuance. And I'm looking for, I guess... restriction on the data people somewhat, right? Like a little hold on, there's got to be other checks and balances against the data that you're looking at. Like, you can't always just be looking at data. There should be other things, because data is not always telling you how people are performing. It's just telling you information about the person. It doesn't actually always tell you how they're performing, how they're doing. And so there needs to be other factors that are taken into account with data. And I would say it's a check and balance on our stupidity. Like, that's really what it comes down to for me. That's what we need. People are not always great, including Will and I. And so we shouldn't have too much power. That's all I'm saying.
No.
So
no, it's not
so
necessary.
Wrap that part up. I think, data's helpful. You can use it, but we need nuance. We need other things that we're looking at to also evaluate performance, how students are doing, how you're doing. Good example, Will, what you were talking about earlier is like students watching videos really quick. Yeah, but are they doing okay in the course?
Right.
Like, are they saying the concepts? Are they getting the ideas? If they are, who cares if they watched half your video? That just means you weren't very helpful. For half
they
or you were
understood
helpful
it, right?
somewhere else. Yeah.
Right.
I was being sarcastic, but So anyway, nuance. See, I needed nuance right there. That's why we need it.
Boom. Look at that.
Boom.
Even we can grow and learn. Look at us.
Yeah, we can grow.
So, altogether, nuance. I love that. It's I hate to be like so platonic on this, but just, the good comes with the bad, and speak up when you see something that's not good enough. There we go. Like, use the LMS. We've got it. It's a part of the landscape now, but you don't have to be privy, or you don't have to be a part of using it unethically or just in a way that makes you not comfortable, right? It's easy. This is Will, today. Will of years ago, from another universe might have been a bit different. I've used it to be big brothery. It's fine. Like, it was part of my job. I was asked to do some things at times. I'm not really great with that today. I probably wouldn't do it, but this Will can talk back to that Will and learn from both. That's the important part.
Yeah.
Once we've got more than one Will, though, it's just madness.
Yeah. Well, more than in one of any of us. This transition. This is a hard one. This is a great one. More. Okay, forget this. Things can grow and learn, and so can tools. They can change, they can get better, they can go crazy, and because of that, we'd like to enter the Miroverse.
Dun, dun, dun! Josh, we have talked about this before, right? I'm pretty sure.
We did. Episode 1 of the High Tech Podcast, the birth
Throwback.
of the Will and Josh experience. That's not true. The Will and Josh experience
I don't like
came
that.
into existence much earlier than that. We just didn't record ourselves. That got worse.
Abort. It's not good.
I'm done. Anyway, we talked about Miro, but we didn't really get to talk about it a ton because that was before, people grow and learn. and we grew and
Right.
learned. And
Right. Remember
realized
the episode where we did like
shouldn't-
six tools in one
we
episode?
did so many whiteboards. We talked about digital whiteboards because it was a hot thing then. We just moved remote. Everybody was like, I need a whiteboard. And we were like, we got 12. And
here's all of them and why.
so we didn't really get to talk a ton about Miro. Now Miro's is reared its head a couple times. You know, we've dropped into different universes of Miro throughout the time at the High Tech Podcast because our good friend Justin loves Miro.
Dun.
Like nobody's business. And so he's talked about Miro when he's been on here. I forget. I don't think it was his first app. I feel like last time he was here,
I think it was his most recent
when he
one.
did Miro.
Yep.
Yeah, it was his most recent one. So he talked about Miro. But again, that was like a brief conversation about Miro, right? So we were trying to think of apps we had to talk about, and we were like, we really need to bring Miro back because Miro has grown a lot since we talked about it the first time. They are now very popular. They have their own.
They've got tons of funding
now.
They've got a conference.
They got tons of funding. They've got their own conference called Miroverse. I think is what it's actually called.
Oh, great.
What it is. So you know, it's perfect. But there's the part of the reason we just think it's hilarious they call themselves Miroverse in that situation is there's a lot of depth to what Miro can do. There's a lot of different things you can do in Miro and go around. And so I think that's why we wanted to come back to it. Now, Will, you haven't used Miro a ton over time, right? You guys don't use it at work at all, do you?
No, we do have it. I don't use it often, but we do have a license. In the corporate space, it's actually really popular for like wireframing and more technical work. So a lot of our engineers and like user experience designers and things like that use it. But I'm not using it. Learning and development's not using it. We're not like delivering content in it yet or doing meetings with it yet.
Okay, cool. I was curious. Like we have an account, and I use Miro probably most. I haven't actually used it in a teaching sense yet. Although some of the stuff we've been talking about, I kind of have some ideas of how I'd like to use it. But I've used it for wireframing and stuff. Like I've done full wireframes. If you guys don't know what wireframes are, that's like the app thing they do, right? Where they like create different frames of what an app or a website would look like, and then they map out where it goes and all that fun jazz. So Miro does really cool wireframing and some cool tools within it that are a lot easier to do than some of the obnoxiously expensive versions of what Miro does. So you can do wireframing and stuff in there. But I think if I could boil down Miro to kind of just the thing that I think would be helpful for you in education is that Miro is by leagues the better, I think, like collaborative online space for live stuff. Okay, like for not your online course, but like if you're actually doing like a live session with somebody, whether it's through Zoom or you're in a classroom or you have people remote, some people aren't, whatever you want to call it. I think Miro is superior for that type of situation because it just gives you a lot of abilities to do stuff. It's basically just a giant space whiteboard playground, in my opinion. Like there's just a lot of room to do stuff in Miro.
Right.
I don't know. Have you used it in an education sense at all? Like, did anybody in class ever use it, or did you?
I don't think I ever adopted this one. No, I had most faculty kind of get scared by the amount of features, not just in Miro, but Lucidchart and some others like that. I used Lucidchart in my master's degree, so that was the whiteboard tools weren't anywhere near where they are today then. But most of the faculty wanted something like Jamboard or whatever. Like they just wanted quick stuff, like sticky notes. They weren't really thinking these broader or bigger positions. And to be honest, Josh, even since we started the podcast, I think a lot of these tools have gotten better at being a part of like the presentation process or like the actual work process. So I haven't had any adoptions like that, but
so one of to what Will's talking about, Miro before it used to be a little bit just more like a really complicated whiteboard. And what I think they've really gotten into, seeing how people have been using it, they still have that. They still have whiteboard features, but really what they've gotten into is this ability to create presentation, content, activities, all in one spot, and be able to create kind of experience and a place for you to go to do that stuff. So like, for example, one of the things I think is super helpful with Miro that a lot of places don't do is, so basically you have this giant board, right? And then in Miro, you can end up creating what they call frames. Now, frames have different uses for different things. There are frames that you can create like fake wireframes, like what we just talked about, that look like a phone or a web browser. But there's also frames that you can just like frame out sections of your content. And where this is really helpful is these frames allow you to basically create like slides and activities and spaces in a digital place, all in this board that you can then navigate students back and forth to.
Right.
So like I could create frames of actual presentation content that have a video in it and have slide content in it like I would have in a PowerPoint presentation. But then like literally right next to it, I can have another frame on a board that's like a built out activity that I did that has some instructions that students can go and collaborate on. And I can set timers in Miro for them to do stuff, and they can collaborate in that space. And it gives you kind of a place to kind of build out spaces virtually, all in one kind of place. And I'm not going to lie, it takes time to figure out how to do this in Miro. Miro is not a low bar tool, in my opinion. It takes some learning to figure out what does what. Now they have some templates that can help you, but I'll be honest, from an education standpoint, they're not super helpful.
A lot of them look corporate-y. Like literally, even one was like corporate like objectives, like monthly and quarterly objectives frameworking.
They know who they're feeding into very popularly, which is a lot of like user experience learning design people like Miro.
Right.
And so they've done a lot of like agile project management stuff in Miro. That said, it's not that hard to kind of like build out shapes, do stuff you can do. You can actually create live polls within the stuff that you're doing. But then the other thing I really like about these frames is I can come in, frame out content, and then I can hide the content. So like I can hide it from my students while they're in there. So that means I can focus them on what I want them to focus on, and then we can move over to this other frame. And Will, actually, one of their new features that I just figured out about a second ago that we had not done was there's a way in frames to, I forget what they call it. It's basically like you can put it into... here we go. You can turn it. They have this. The big thing that I think is really helpful is they've created a new feature in the tool, which is essentially like create meeting. And so you can turn this into a meeting, which then starts to give you some features to do some live stuff. So what you'll see here, Will and I are in Miro right now, messing around while we're talking. And I can actually turn this frame that Will and I were using earlier to vote on circles, because that's what we do. I can create different frames in a meeting and set how many minutes I want us to be on that frame. So I can set like 20 minutes here. I can set, 15 minutes here. And then I can hit start.
Oh, snap. It pulled me in. It pulled me into the board that he's working on.
Into the frame, in the first frame. So bring this into your education mindset, right? My first frame could be like, intro to, beginning of tanks, because we're doing tanks 101, right? So I could do that here.
Hell yeah.
I've got a time counter in the bottom. I'm in a facilitator view. My students can collaborate. They can draw. They can ask questions. I can lock them down to not do that stuff if I don't want them to. But like I can legitimately present like I would be on a PowerPoint presentation. And then, Will, I have a second frame. I'm going to hit go. And it'll take me over to the second frame just like a PowerPoint presentation. It gives me my time counter. The important part is, though, I can build into here content, videos. I can build in activities.
YouTube videos, like embedding and stuff like that.
They have polls and stuff. So everything we've talked about, you could do in like a poll everywhere. I can do here in Miro, all within this plan.
This thing is a Swiss Army knife.
Yeah, I could also build out separate frames for group activities, right? Like, so I could make a group activity over here. Maybe I want them to, I have a prompt for them. They're going to collaborate on it. They can get Post-it notes. They can get shapes. They can do all this stuff that you could give them in a classroom virtually. And this is where I think the power of Miro exists. It gives you the ability to kind of create that environment that's much more rich, that you can kind of flexibly do things. I think their biggest weakness is just, it's a lot of learning to figure out how to do it. Like it's gonna take a little bit of time. But if you learn how to do it, they have really ramped up the facilitator abilities that you can do in here, that allow you to control things better so that your students don't have to like learn all the stuff about doing things. Like I can come into this place and preset everything up for my students so that really they're just following prompts when they get in here, or they're following my content. And then, as Will noticed, when I did presentation mode, Will was over somewhere else on the whiteboard.
Yeah.
Like doing stuff.
It slapped me.
He got distracted. When I hit go, it brings everybody back to the spot that we're on this board. And then I also have the ability at any point in the meeting to click on my face and go, bring everyone to me, and it will force everyone over to where I want them to look in the board. And that's what I really like about it. It gives you control in an online environment where sometimes it can be difficult to get students to focus.
Oh my gosh. I mean, how hard is that in classroom, right? But suddenly you got people in different breakout rooms, you got different people just go talk, like, hey, real quick, everybody back to me, click, and it then literally came back.
Yeah.
I do want to as well emphasize that while that's a great organizational tool, it helps move the meeting along, it's not as hardcore or lockdown that I can't then just move away again, right? Like,
yes.
If someone was finishing their sentence when Josh did that, they aren't like locked in with Josh. Maybe there's a way to do that too. But like when he just did that to me, I can still like scroll back up to where I was and then maybe come back to the meeting. Like it helps to organize and pull people along and you know, keep a flow to the meeting, but it's not like punitive lockdown. You're not allowed to leave the space unless I let you kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. So it gives you some control, and just some other features they got going on. They've added like shared notes into the space, so you can create notes that you can share with students, things like that. They now actually have direct integration with Zoom, so you can actually integrate this with Zoom. That's a new thing that they've done. They integrate with Google Classroom or Google Calendar, Google Classroom, Teams, Slack, a whole bunch of stuff. So they've learned how to kind of like get into the other environments that you already use. So it's cool. I like them. Now, just real quick, the stuff Will and I are messing with, that's in a paid version. So they have a free version that's a little bit more limited. But the positive is they are committed to education. And so they do actually have an education plan. And the getting in is pretty easy to get into their plan. And with that, you get pretty much all the pro features, except for they have a video chat tool now in Miro. You don't get that, but honestly, I think it's not as useful as like a Zoom or other stuff you've been using anyway. And I think they integrate anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So just integrate them with that tool. Or you don't have to integrate. Sharing is super easy. You create it. You can create a share link where anybody can edit. You can send that to your students. They click on it, and they can immediately get in without even creating an account. And so it's super easy to be able to do it that way as well. So yeah, I think that's a good return to the Miroverse.
I love it. I love it. That was a pretty safe journey too. We didn't run into any zombie wills or anything. There's no issues with that.
No, nothing too crazy.
Miroverse.
Doctor Strange did not show up, although that would have been a much different movie. You know what I mean? Like he went to a different universe and he was just in Miro. Like that was
gosh. That one
it
scene when he went through the universes, that would have been pretty cool.
That would have been pretty cool.
Fell through a whiteboard.
Anyway, Marvel, if you're listening, because we know you do.
Yeah, clearly.
Pick that up for Doctor Strange. I almost said episode. Doctor Strange 3. It could
We've
be
got
Doctor
ideas.
Strange Return to the Miroverse. So anyway.
Sweet. All right, folks, jam-packed. The LMS of surveillance, Miro the Miroverse. We love this process as always. Make sure to find us on Twitter. Like, subscribe, follow, do those things. Review us on Google and Apple and all those podcast locations. We appreciate those as well. You can connect with us by email at inbox@hightechpod.us. You can find our websites. You can find our websites. All of the websites that we have.
Multiples? Did you build another one? I didn't know about that.
You can find
I've not been updating that one.
Episodes on our website, the singular website that we have in this universe.
Yes.
Which is hightechpod.us. Thank you again for joining us on another week as we continue to learn what it looks like to harness technology in this multiverse and the next, whether it's the physical or the digital. Until next time, folks, we'll see you.
See ya.